Hi, I'm Suzanne Beasterfield. I'm sorry that I'm not able to present live for you tonight, but I hope that if you have questions and comments that you will let me know. My presentation is about what difference makes, specifically when we're talking about training white people to be teachers in diverse classrooms. So I'd like to share just a little tiny bit, very abbreviated, about a pilot study that I did, and then talk specifically. I know there are some teacher candidates watching this presentation, and so I wanted to talk to you and make a case for diversity and address you specifically. So what's the issue here? What are we talking about? Well, in the first place, most of our teaching force in K-12 public school in America is white and female. Now, these statistics are about 10 years old from the National Center for Education Information, but things have not changed radically since then. So that's a lot of white females teaching. And we have an increasingly complex, a very diverse student body in America. And the other statistics there are from AACTE. So why does this matter? Well, number one, stereotype threat. So this is the idea that even if somebody does not treat you differently and according to a stereotype, the threat of that or the perception that that might be possible can affect a student's learning. There are cultural differences that might affect learning in certain students. And there are teacher biases, whether they are intended or not, subconscious, disconscious. And there can be an association of power with whiteness, so that can cause clashes between students and teachers. And students need role models and people they can identify with and see themselves in. There's also a white middle class belief that anybody can succeed if they just try hard enough, that sometimes can deny the experiences of marginalized populations, and that can be a problem. So I had 3 questions when I did a little pilot study about 5 years ago. How much do teacher demographics affect student outcomes? I'm one of these white teachers. White and female from Idaho, did not grow up around a lot of diversity, wanted to be a teacher. So I'm part of this demographic. Well, the research on this is mixed, and frankly, it's weak. I think there needs to be a lot more because anecdotally, a lot of us believe that this matters, but we need people to show how it does matter. So specifically the research on race matching. So the idea that the teacher is the same race as students and how that will affect their outcomes. We don't have good information to support it or disprove it at this point. So I was also wondering how current prospective teachers address diversity and what happens when we put them in a diverse classroom. So what I did is I gathered some white female pre-service teachers who were in a field experience and interviewed them several times with a very open-ended protocol, and coded and compared those things for theme. My participants did not deviate from some things I had read, especially Sleater from 2008. So what happens when we have white teachers in diverse classrooms? They're naively optimistic. They don't seem very aware of discrimination. I wonder how this would change. And if Black Lives Matter has changed this at all. I would be curious, but don't know. There are lower expectations for students of color. There's fear in talking about race and racism, and then the white teachers don't think of themselves as cultural beings. Culture is other. I saw, especially with the people that I talked to, the naive optimism. So they mean well and they wanted to do well and be good. They want to be good teachers. They're earnest. They're lovely people, but they're really afraid to even talk about race or even put that on the table. So the first theme in crossed interviews that I saw a lot was that this isn't about culture. Emotional connections, knowing the students as individuals, that's what matters. So anything related to culture or community, they didn't talk about, which was interesting because I told them this was about diversity, but none of that came into play when they talked about their students. There were 1 or 2 small exceptions to that, but overwhelmingly not a lot of acknowledgement of culture and how that might affect students. And these are a couple quotes. The names are pseudonyms. most of them, again, were very optimistic and very positive and uh, very intent on being good and reaching students and wanting to accept all kids and that individuality. It did have some exceptions, like this person we'll call Jennifer, who believed that ELL learners use that as a crutch to not do things, and had a few negative things, but largely everything was very positive and affirming. Okay, so if we just get to know the kids and love them, then learning will happen. That was a theme. The second theme is this idea that you can't teach about diversity, you have to be in a diverse classroom. So they felt that you needed experience with diversity. They felt they had experience with diversity. Even when it was apparent that it was actually, their experiences were very narrow. And this one was interesting. This quote down here with Wendy, she paused and hesitated and became more quiet and careful when she was more or less pushed to mention race. So that idea, more than her words, the way she said her words became very important. And I found this across lots of interviews. So that fear to talk about race, and other taboo topics. So poverty, also looks of fear and mistrust at me, the interviewer. Are you trying to get me? Is this going to be a gotcha, catch me in a moment kind of thing? And that's a problem if we can't talk about those things. But anyway, we'll get back to that. They also, I on purpose put religion into the mix, and they all seemed to feel that they were very open about religion. Most of the people that I interviewed uh, did not associate themselves with a particular religion, but said they knew a lot about religions. But what they meant by that was Christianity. And none of them had any thoughts or mentions of the religion of the children in their classrooms and how that might possibly affect them, which I thought was interesting. Okay. They also were really quick to say, no, I wouldn't do anything different based on culture. I would not teach. I want to be fair. I want to treat everybody the same. And I'll talk more about that. So they're not talking about it. Is it because it's not on their radar or not in their comfort zone? I don't know. But it seemed problematic. So my conclusions then, I think if we have these earnest, lovely white women who want to teach, then by all means, let's help them. Certainly, let's recruit diverse teachers, but what can we do to help these lovely white women to be better able to handle diversity? Because obviously just putting them in a diverse classroom wasn't doing it for the people that I talked to. And I also think that they need space and, to safely and civilly and openly communicate about these issues. And that seems to be lacking. Okay, so if you're a teacher candidate and you're watching this, you might be thinking, okay, why is it a big deal what they said, and why do we need to do something about what these teachers said? All right, so I'm going to go through this. There is a value in middle class white culture that we need to treat everybody the same, and we need to be culture blind. I mean this without guile and without being sarcastic in the least. I think this is a noble idea. I think it's misguided, but I think it's noble and well meant. The tension, though, and the problem is that there are factors about people's identities that can affect the way they learn and how well they learn. And if we're even squeamish talking about those things, then how can we bring them out and address them and help our children to achieve fully? So I want to talk some more about that. On a totally different note then, what if I knew that a student of mine, their mother had passed away recently? I would hope that would make me more sensitive in the classroom. And maybe I would need to learn a little bit more about how students of the age that I'm teaching handle grief or don't handle it. I still want them to be academically successful, of course, but now it becomes something I'm thinking about. Am I being unfair by treating this child differently? Well, I don't think so. I'm trying to make a good environment for the child. I'm trying to reach that child and help them. Is that unfair treatment just because everybody else still has their parents? I don't think so. Would we ever dream of refusing to alter our speech or the content or to regulate other students' speech in the situation of a child who has become an orphan. Oh my goodness. I hope we would not do that. Would we insist that this can't make a difference and we're just going to go on with the status quo? I hope we wouldn't do that. But would we draw a lot of attention to it, dwell on it, make it a thing if it's not a big thing? I hope we wouldn't do that either. So let's say that it's something different. Let's say that we find out that one of our students is Muslim. Should be the same thing. We should be sensitive. We should learn about it. In this case, instead of grief, it's about tensions and issues in the media or different things this child might be experiencing that we would know if we learn more about diversity and we learn more about how to address it. In addition, then we might want to learn more about family, that person's particular family and culture specifically. The Muslim world is huge, and there are a lot of different variations on how people practice. And so knowing some more about that child specifically could help them learn better. Are we giving unfair treatment to the child by considering the fact that he is Muslim? I don't think so. I think we're just creating a good, caring environment for the student. Would we dream of refusing to acknowledge this, to insist that this can't make a difference, or alternately draw a lot of attention and dwell on it? I hope we wouldn't do any of those things, just as we wouldn't do it for that child who has this other issue. It should be the same if it's a different kind of issue that's associated with a part of their identity and group that they're in. Okay, so why would we ignore things or minimize things that make a difference in a child's learning? I hope that we wouldn't. We would want them to be able to learn the best they can. And if that means differentiating according to identity considerations, then by all means, we should be doing it, shouldn't we? Okay, so something to think about as far as identity. What's big to me might not be big to you. So this symbol here is ki in Japanese, Ki, and it's like awareness. So in Japanese, we say kiotsukete. It's translated as be careful, but it literally means turn on your ki. So what are you aware of? What's in your radar? What's the thing that you're thinking about and that you're focused on? That's your ki. So what's in my radar and is important in my identity might be different than yours. So what parts of your identity are on your radar right now and why? A few things that are not usually on my radar, but 4 things that I just threw up there are: I'm white, I'm 49, I'm a mother, I'm cisgender. Some of these things I don't think about very often. I don't wake up, stare at the mirror and every morning and go, oh my gosh, I'm white. I'm not confronted with my whiteness on a daily basis, mainly because I live in a place that most everybody else is white. But the first time, I've been to Japan about a half dozen times, and the first time my plane landed in Japan and I got off the plane, I can tell you my whiteness became a key. It was central to, it was something I was thinking about, and it was a part of my identity that became big to me. Now, I don't think the other people wandering around in that airport were wandering around going, my Japanese-ness, I am so Japanese. But I was thinking, oh my goodness, I am so white. Just because it was a big issue to me doesn't mean that it would be to the people who are around me. So who are you most today? But how will that change tomorrow? In the case of the airport, I know why I was feeling my whiteness, but kids especially may not understand why this part of my identity is so important to me right now. Okay, so this isn't just about being sensitive. I want to make that clear. There are repercussions to learning. Krashen talks about the affective filter. We talk about this in second language acquisition. I think it works in all classrooms. An affective filter, basically that means when negative feelings go up, learning goes down. So if you have something that is interfering with your ability to learn, you will filter out learning. We want to lower the affective filter. So some of these issues of identity, when they are central, when they're key, they're on the radar, this child is thinking about them, we need to do things to keep that from filtering out their ability to learn in our classroom. Okay, we also need to be really careful. And the one I want to call attention to here is, I've heard people say, why are gay people all about being gay all the time? I don't go around talking about, oh, I'm so straight. So my answer to that is, well, maybe that part of their identity, for whatever reason or reasons, is being brought to the forefront. This is something that they are thinking about and confronted with. This is a big piece of their identity. And just because it's not to me, and just because I don't know or understand the reasons why, doesn't mean that I should be allowed to dismiss that or think that it's not legitimate. And the same idea, if I say race shouldn't matter in the classroom, I'll talk about that one in a second. Or all my kids matter and I'm going to treat them all the same. Well, but if there's a certain thing about this child that matters, as I talked about before, shouldn't we address that? So I'm a teacher and I say I'm colorblind. I don't care about children's orientation. That's none of my business. I'm going to treat everybody the same. The problem with this then is that you could be denying a key part of their identity, something that is very important and precious to them. So I've heard students of color say that when they hear a white teacher say that, they feel like they're being erased. You don't want to acknowledge who I am and what matters to me when you say I'm going to be colorblind. So we need to be aware of that. But you might have another student of color who would love for you to act colorblind and not take any consideration. So it's not something that is a foregone conclusion, right? Something where we need to pay attention. So there's all kinds of situations with students. And in general, what difference, so these differences, what do we do with it? Well, we learn. We do things to protect the child's learning environment so that they are able to learn in their best way. We adapt ourselves to the students rather than making them adapt to us and forcing our ways of being and knowing and speaking on them, right? So the idea is, if a kid's being raised by gay parents, learn what that might mean, protect that child in the ways that they might need protecting, adapt who you are as a teacher. If the child is transgender, do the same thing. If a child is the only African-American student in your classroom, learn, be aware, watch, be careful. Or if the child is living in a foster home, all these things apply. So, okay, well, does that mean that, am I just saying, oh, the same thing that the people in my pilot study said, which is I'm going to treat all children the same? Well, yeah, you do need to get to know all your students as individuals. Absolutely know their story and honor that story and who they are. But we need to acknowledge the fact that some gifts and challenges, behaviors, tend to show up in particular groups and might affect a student's learning in ways that are not unique to that individual child. So what we're saying here is we can't be completely relativistic. In this case, relativism meaning every child is completely unique and not affected by their culture and their identity. That's not true. Okay, so just an opinion that I've got to put down here about how we talk in class. So if I'm being careful about my teacher talk, is that self-censorship? Well, I don't think so. Is it restriction of free speech? Let me think about that one. Would we call it restricting free speech if I told you not to say hateful and hurtful things at a funeral? That's not restricting free speech. That's something different, right? So I don't think that's it when we're watching how we talk. Is it forcing us to be PC? I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I think we're talking about being sensitive to things that might be something to our students. And, okay, don't be a jerk in the name of I should get to talk and say what I want. That's part of it. Okay, so what difference does difference make? I think that difference and how identity can affect students, whatever part of that identity might be, needs to be something that we're paying attention to, especially our white teachers who might not be inclined to have those things at the forefront of their mind. We need to change that. And we need to figure out how to address those things. In America, diversity is our strength. I think we need to embrace it. The fact that you can have a picture of a human being, and that human being could be American. And you could make a case that they look like an American, every human being, because there is not one thing. I think is a beautiful thing, and we need to embrace it. And also as teachers, we need to make sure that our students feel valued and loved and supported. It's one of the reasons we get into the profession. And being aware of how different aspects of identity affect student learning is one way that we can reach that goal. So thank you for your attention today. And if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I'm Suzanne Beasterfield, and there is my email address. So thank you.